Hello, friends. You are in for a real treat today. I have with me on today's podcast, Joseph Grenny, and I know many of you are familiar with his work. He is a New York Times best-selling author of 8 books, including the communication classic, Crucial Conversations. Now, I'm a big fan, so if anybody has not read Crucial Conversations, you have to track it down. It's an amazing work and so parallels the ministry, the mission, the way God would have us interact with one another, especially when conflict comes about. Highly recommend it. His work has been used by nearly half of the Forbes Global 2000 and has helped millions of people achieve better relationships and results, both professionally and personally. He co-founded Crucial Learning, formerly known as VitalSmarts, one of the world's most respected learning and organization development firms, offering courses in communication, performance, and leadership. You'll want to track them down online. Joseph also co-founded the Other Side Academy. Now, we're going to talk about the Other Side Academy a lot today. It's a residential program that teaches vocational and life skills to people with histories of crime, addiction, and homelessness. I mean, that's something we know a little bit about around here at Embracing Brokenness Ministries. So without further ado. All right. Well, Joseph, great to have you on the podcast. Thank you for joining us. I really appreciate taking the time to do this today.
Well, Steve, it's an honor to be part of your work.
Well, one of the things that left a huge impression with me, and I think I saw you speak first at a global leadership summit like a decade ago. And it was pretty obvious, again, that you are very passionate about what you do. In the social sciences, I know mostly in business, but it has completely changed my world, the way I see things even. So the influence has been tremendous. I don't know, where did that all begin for you? Where did that passion come from? Where did that all begin?
Well, at the end of the day, for you as well as me, it's all about people. And I think that, I'll answer that in 2 ways. First is, I think the most fascinating questions in the world are, why do people do what they do and how can you help them change? And the most important questions. But, from a religious perspective too, it seems like that's what God's all about. Yes. If you look at the Bible, the story from the beginning all the way to the end really is God taking an interest in either an individual or a group of people and helping them become something that they weren't before. It's all about influence. It's all about change. It's all about why we do the things we do and how to help people become what they're capable of becoming. And I can't think of anything more joyful, meaningful, or challenging.
Well, and look at the examples, right? You said it yourself. We go back, we can look at Moses, probably one of the greatest leaders of all time, documented there through, I don't know, millions of people that he had to figure out how to manage, right? And how to influence.
Yeah.
Thankfully, he had God at the center of that equation, but there it is. There it is. Absolutely.
Yeah. And the flip side of that story is it's really the story of God doing things with Moses too, right? So, God takes an interest in this guy who's in Pharaoh's court and living a certain kind of life around a certain number of values and things like that, and starts doing intentional things to help him become something better and different. He takes him out of that environment. He exposes him to other people. He gets mentored in different ways. He has a chance to encounter God. And so there's situational changes, social changes, skills that he needs to acquire. And his father-in-law has to come along at some point and mentor him. So all of these things that God orchestrates, he does for all of us. And I think the more we understand the broad variety of those kinds of influences, the more we can intentionally engage them in our lives too.
What I have learned a lot from your work and from your team is the need, as you said, for that cooperation, not just cooperating with what God's doing in our life, but taking that message and spreading it. And I think in the organizations I've served and the ones that, like you, I mean, I've worked with folks, and my wife and I have worked with folks that are, in the more marginalized spaces of the world, whether it's in prison, or in her case, she worked for almost a dozen years in a mission here in our community, for people experiencing homelessness. And so, we have the opportunity to affect change in a lot of different ways. It's not always obvious what everyone needs in that way, but you have done some tremendous work beyond your, crucial learning and what I first was introduced to, VitalSmarts. Tell me how did what you did there, and it had to be a significant part of who God made you to be. How did that translate into doing something that we're going to talk about here, the Other Side Academy? How did that translate for you?
Well, I have a conviction that that I see borne out again and again in my life, that the greatest evidence that I'm aware of God's love for us and of his incredible power is the things that we understand he sets in motion, sometimes years in advance, to save us when we're ready. And all of us have been the beneficiaries of that, of things that had to have begun 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago, just to arrive at that moment when you were in a particular spot. And I have the joy of being part of that, part of God's work for hundreds of his children who have lived in and out of prisons and jails, years and years on the streets, long time addictions, and who are just trapped in this seemingly inescapable kind of awful situation. And the Other Side Academy that we helped start 8 years ago is a 2.5-year life skills program for people with long histories of crime, addiction, and homelessness. The program is free. Mm-hmm. And that's the remarkable thing, is that those who most need that kind of support are in the least position to pay. So what we end up doing is either tapping out the mortgage of our family or going to the government or insurance companies and others paying for things, which really becomes part of the problem. If I'm caught in this narcissistic lifestyle, the fact that other people are fixing things for me becomes actually a contributor to the whole bad mindset. So here people get to arrive and become part of the solution rather than part of the problem. The way they support the house is by running social enterprises. So we have, and this is remarkable to me, Steve, the #1 rated moving company in the entire state of Utah is run by a bunch of criminals at the Other Side Academy.
I read that. That is an awesome story, by the way.
It's astounding. Oh. They run the #1 rated thrift boutiques, the #1 rated storage business and construction firm. We do remodel jobs, and just these admired businesses run by people that were incredibly marginalized and written off by the rest of us. Yes. And the important thing to understand is, how does that work? How can you concentrate 150 longtime felons in one home in downtown Salt Lake City and not have it turn into chaos? But rather, when the city tried to challenge us and our ability to stay there, all of our neighbors turned out and said, don't you dare make them move. Wow. It's a safer neighborhood now. It's a cleaner neighborhood. We love these people. They're terrific neighbors. How does that happen? Well, it's all about influence. It's all about, how do you help people profoundly change? And that's what the Other Side Academy does.
And it's so counterintuitive. You're right. Most of the time we look, and look, I'm guilty. Before I understood the homeless crisis that we now see like spread in spades everywhere, but until I really understood, my wife and I got together and I volunteered to that mission. But I would have been one of those guilty parties of being, as I walked down the street, making sure I crossed over and went to the other side and then back again without really knowing what was going on inside that mission, until I understood like the needs, the goals. The individuals I met there weren't any different than you and I. I mean, they just aren't. Yeah, there's some mental health issues, but let me tell you, yes, they burned some bridges. There are a lot of issues, but man, they just need a helping hand. They need someone to care about them, don't they? I mean, that's really what it's about.
Yeah, the key that I think we found at the Other Side Academy is love and truth. Those are the two things, and we tend to stink at doing both. We're okay at doing one or the other. So some of us are okay on truth, just saying, hey, look, you're homeless and you brought this on yourself and you've got weaknesses and you aren't addressing them and you continue to use drugs, and maybe there's some truth in some of that, but there's no love in it. On the other side, we've got the love piece that people seem to be good at, but then they can't do the truth. So it's all about compassion and giving, and let me take care of your problems and give you a place to stay, and here's some food and a voucher. But what we don't do is the challenge and the mentoring and the confrontation of people's personal responsibility. If you can learn to do both, you can change the world.
Well, and I love that. Change the world. That's what we hope for. And God, God's in the business of changing the world. So, we want to be the right kind of ally in doing that. What I saw often employed is sort of this center, more person-focused model. It's God first, but in the center is, how do we come around an individual with different needs? And this was something my wife worked on as VP of programs there. So it was trying to understand the underlying issues, right? So we have all of us are influenced by people around us from the day we're born. I mean, and it's never perfect, right? God shares, he talks about wounding, he talks about the issues that we face in the Bible, and he shows us solutions for that. But how do we get underneath those lies? You talk about truth being such an integral piece of that. Well, it's truth on both sides, right? You share the truth, but these are children of God. These are people that are created in his image. Like, and I need healing as much as any of these folks do. So what makes it unique? Like at the Other Side Academy, because we do spiritual programs ourselves, but do you integrate some of that into it's a 30-month roughly program?
Yeah, minimum of 2.5 years, 30 months. So let me describe what we do, and then we can relate to it. I talk about how it relates spiritually too. You look at how God decided to design the universe, and apparently God figured that it would be good for us to all share a planet. Because apparently there are stars without number and planets without number. So he could have given us all our own real estate and said, just work on this on your own. But instead, what God does is he says, I'm going to cram you all together, 8 billion of you stuck onto this tiny little bulb. And you're going to have to figure it out. You're going to bump into each other, resent each other, wrong each other. All that's going to happen. That must be part of the plan, right? And so what we found at the Other Side Academy is the key to spiritual growth, the key to personal growth, the key to the development of a conscience and compassion for others is to be in a community that tells you the truth about yourself. And so twice a week, we'll sit in a circle, and about 20 students will be in one room. And all that they do is just help one another understand how they affected each other in the previous days.
Wow.
And it can be pretty raw. It's out there. And people are often at first both in admiration, but then shocked, because they just think, wow, I don't think I could take this. If I sat in a group of 19 people that lived with me and had them tell me the truth about what they see in me, I don't know that I'd be able to bear up under that. And it is challenging in the early days. But the sad thing is, the only reason it's hard is because it's unusual. If you and I were accustomed to it, if we were used to living in that kind of honest environment, then it wouldn't be such a horrifying thing. It would be comfortable, because the key to trust is truth. If people live in an environment where there are no secrets, where I know how you feel and what you're thinking, and it's right out there in the open, I learn to respond to it. And one of two things happens when you live in a place. So for example, we have a moving company, and a fairly new student assigned to the moving company is out the other day. And our client is a pretty attractive younger woman. And this guy has still got his jail and street manners going. And so he does what he would do out there. He's checking her out. And every opportunity, he makes sure he's in the room where she's in. And then he compliments her skirt or something like that. And so all this creepy stuff is starting to go on. The beautiful thing at the Other Side Academy, different than the rest of the world, where people would talk behind his back, criticize him, go dump to HR, or probably say nothing because it's not my problem, not my job, right?
Right.
Where most of us would prefer to live on our own planet, at the Other Side Academy on a Tuesday night, a group of 20 is going to sit in a circle, and somebody's going to look at this guy and say, I was out on a move the other day, and you just about gave up our reputation. Wow. You creepy, slimy, resentful, selfish. And it's going to sound pretty harsh the way it's going to come out. And this guy's going to deny it. He's going to say, I didn't do that. You don't know what was in my head. But then another guy who saw it is going to say it. And another guy is going to say it. And one of the women in the house is going to say, you've been doing that to me too. And when everybody around you is telling you your horse is behind, pretty soon you start realizing you better saddle up, right? And so after about 20, 25 minutes of this, it starts to get through. And let me tell you what happens every single time. The next time this guy is out on a move, he is circumspect. He is on his best behavior because he knows he's being watched. And even if he doesn't want to be that guy, he's going to pretend like he's that guy. And then he's going to start slacking off after another week or two, and he's going to get reminded again by his peers. And eventually he is going to become moral and decent and honest and transparent. And that's how it happens. Now, again, you and I might think, boy, this is really a challenging thing. But now, having heard the Other Side Academy description, I defy anybody to go back and read the New Testament and read what interactions were like between Jesus and his apostles and tell me if that doesn't sound more like the Other Side Academy than our typical church. What we tend to do is not be that honest with each other. We think turning the other cheek means giving people permission to continue doing what they're doing. And that's not what Jesus ever did. And so that's what truth looks like. And unfortunately, you and I live in a world where it's so unusual that it seems shocking and scary.
Oh, it does. And you brought up a good point, and I'm thinking about the gathering of the thousands of people that show up in a church service on Sunday morning, it almost feels like it's the fig leaf shows up, right? There's a veil over the reality of who we really are. We just want to show our best self all times.
Yeah.
And what I love about what you're saying is that it really requires a vulnerability by the folks involved. That's the only place change happens, in my view. Not the fake social media pieces that we show up with all the time. And of course, these are folks that have, probably maybe repeat offenders, maybe have been in prison prior, right? At times.
Our average student's been arrested 25 times. So it's the definition of repeat offender.
Yeah. But yet, as I understand it, this program, we said about 8 years, you said now, has had tremendous success rate at getting folks to really deal with the deeper issues, hasn't it?
Yeah, and that's how it works. It's a social process. And I think at the end of the day, spirituality is sociality. That those social processes are where the Spirit comes and helps us learn to be vulnerable and honest and connect with each other. My real belief is that when we talk about the atonement of Jesus Christ and what he did, if you look in the 17th chapter of John at the great high priestly prayer he offers before going into the Garden of Gethsemane, most of what he talks about there is not that we want them to become one with God. 7 times his reference is becoming one with each other.
Yes.
He's talking about, we hope that they learn to get along as well as you and I, father and son, get along with each other. And it's that's the context at the Other Side Academy too. The grist mill for spiritual growth is relationships. Relationships at the end of the day are, I think, the fundamental spiritual process of human life.
Wow. Well said, because in community is where we thrive. God, Adam didn't thrive as well alone until Eve was pulled from his loin, so, and then of course
boy, did they have some adventures.
Oh yeah, well, that's true. Big adventures. Of course, you got to name the animals. That would have been fun.
That's kind of fun, yeah. But did they argue over who gets to say which one? And I get the zebra, you get the wildebeest, or
right. I'm just glad he didn't name dogs lions and lions dogs, because our golden retriever might chew us up and eat us for lunch. I have to believe that a part of the work that you did with Crucial Learning and with your commitment toward influence and helping just businesses, helping people around the world change for the good, has to have come into play in even the curriculum, right? That was created. I mean, for me, Crucial Conversations, here it is. That not only the book, but everything you taught there is so Matthew 18 in some ways, right? The place where when we end up in conflict with someone, what do? We go to them one-on-one. We don't go to our neighbors and talk about it, because, that's just, there's nothing in it that's Jesus modeled, right? Relationship is so critically important. So how much did that influence? Did you contribute a lot to the curriculum that is laid out at the Other Side Academy?
Yeah, so let me describe how the process worked for me. And
wonderful.
Maybe if I were a better Christian, it would have been different than this. But here's how it works. We try in writing the books to do justice to the social science and keep it separate from any kind of religious influence to begin with. But just to say, if it's a social science book, integrity means it's going to be based on good social science. So, for example, with Crucial Conversations, we literally went into workplaces to say, let's watch how people deal with politically and emotionally risky issues and try to code the things that work the best and test it. And so that's what gets published in the book. But as a Christian, what I feel obligated to do afterwards is say, all right, that was the best that the social science process could yield for us anyway. And so, but now let me compare that to what I believe. Let me compare that to my religious commitments. And so then I would go back to the Bible and say, what does the Bible teach about communication? So I had this interesting experience of going back through and saying, all right, can I look at politically and emotionally risky conversations in the Old and New Testament? Well, yeah, they're all over the place. Yeah. But then I started realizing when it's between a human and a human, it's just as screwed up as the stuff I see in the workplace. And so let's pull out a special data set and say, let's just look at where the divine is talking to the human. Let's just look at where God or Jesus Christ is talking directly to a human being. And let's use that as the data set. And it comes out exactly the same.
Wow.
It's exactly what you'd expect. Number one, that God has, no surprise, an unflinching commitment to truth. God doesn't sugarcoat. God doesn't say, I'm going to try to spare your feelings by not telling you how it really is, but God does love simultaneously. I suspect even when we see Jesus saying scribes, Pharisees, and hypocrites, there's a lot we don't know about his tone of voice, about whether there was a tear coming down as he said that, about the entire expression of compassion. And even as I say that, I know what the answer is. It wasn't with his lips curled into a snarl. It was with sadness.
Yes.
And so I think the data set reconfirmed for me that social science process just helps us approach truth from a different direction. If you look at the book Influencer, I found the same thing. So once again, having studied what do we know about the sources of influence that shape human behavior, I then went back to the Bible and started in Genesis and went all the way through Revelations and said, let's find every single extended story where God takes an influence in a human being and tries to help them become better than they were. So you start with Adam and Eve, and you get Noah, and you get Abraham and Sarai, and so all the way through, you pull all those stories out. And then I said, all right, now what, and this is important for the audience to understand, because when we think of godly influence, what we think is a voice coming from a burning bush. That is this much of the scriptures. Most of what God is doing most of the time is using 6 other sources of influence. God is giving you a chance to get mentored and acquire skills. Look at Joseph, who had to be in prison before he was going to come out and have great responsibility in Pharaoh's court to save the children of Israel. He's going to surround you with different people. He's going to bring mentors in. After Saul is on the road to Damascus, the first thing he's told to do is to go to Ananias. He's going to have a mentor, and he's going to be part of a Christian community and get that kind of support. He's going to change your environment. 21 times in the scriptures, people are told to move, change your zip code. If you want to change your life, change your location. And God continues to use all these sources of influence. So for me, that process of going back to the scriptures and saying, what can we learn about influence by looking at the full array of things that God does, enriches our understanding of how to help each other. And it corresponds perfectly with social science.
Well, it's so encouraging to hear that, because obviously at that time, I didn't know what went behind it, what came behind all of the work that you're doing. And it's so encouraging to hear you say that, because, God's placed you in a significant role of influence, in the world stage, so to speak, in ways that you can bring about that change and do it, not covertly, because I don't think that's what's happening here, but you certainly have broadened the audience with all the work that you've done, and then to be able to parallel that back to the Word of God. I am just so thrilled to hear that. Thank you for sharing that. To back up the truck just a second, not the moving truck, but this truck. How does somebody even qualify? What does the process look like for you, to kind of work with the authorities or the people involved to help folks at that level? What does that look like?
Yeah, there are 2 different paths to the Other Side Academy. One is you can just walk in. So I'm about half a block away from our campus here in Denver, Colorado, and there's a bench at the front door. And so if there's somebody that woke up last night on the streets here in downtown Denver, and the person that they were right next to just overdosed and died, this becomes a rock bottom moment for me. And I say, I'm sick and tired of this. I want a different life. The beauty of the fact that nobody has to pay, that this is free, is they can walk in right now, sit on that bench, and we're going to leave them sitting there for a while. You have to want to be at the Other Side Academy. You don't get court ordered or assigned, and your family can't make you go. You sit on that bench, and we might leave you there for 2 or 3 hours to see if you're serious. And you get to see how the hustle and flow of the house goes, and see people smiling and walking around with a sense of purpose, and probably recognize a couple of people you knew from the streets who are hard to recognize now.
Right.
And so once you've done that, the next step is you're going to be brought in, and 3 of the older students in the house are going to interview you. And they're going to shake you down to see if you're serious about doing the hard work of changing your life, because that creates a social contract with this new community. The person interviewing you is probably going to be the one that's going to be on the bunk sitting just above or below you. And so that conversation is sacred and important as you start to learn the norms and expectations of the community. And they're going to talk with you pretty candidly about your weaknesses. People come in saying, I've got a drug problem. What they're going to tell you over there, their words, not mine, is your problem isn't you have a drug problem. Your problem is you're a liar, a thief, a manipulator, a narcissist. That's the problem. And if you want to fix that, we can help you, because that's who I was 3 months ago. And I'm working on changing that too. And so being honest about what the real foundational problems are. I don't know how to connect with human beings and manage my emotions. And okay, good. Let's get to work. And if you get accepted, you're in. It starts that minute. The second path then is if you've been arrested again and you're in the county jail facing new charges, you can write a letter. And then 3 of our students will go from the house to the jail. They'll sit with you in the pod. They'll interview you right there. And if you get accepted, they'll give you a letter saying that you're provisionally accepted to the Other Side Academy. You then take that to your prosecutor and judge, and you have to sell them on the idea. But the beauty here in Colorado, as well as in Utah, is that the judges have so much respect for what's happening at the academy that for many, many outstanding charges, they'd rather send you to the academy than to jail or prison.
That makes sense. And especially the criminal justice system. I mean, it is there's a rework needed, no question about it. This seems like an incredible solution, a possible solution for many.
Yeah, and the two have to work hand in hand.
Yeah.
We know that students who are facing, so in Utah, for example, our 130 students there, they're collectively facing 1,000 years of incarceration.
Wow.
So if they weren't at the academy, that's what they'd be doing right now. And you and I'd be the ones paying for that. We're the ones paying for the incarceration. So what we know works best is when they are held tightly accountable by the criminal justice system, no flinching. If they are sentenced, we got a guy here, Adam, in Denver, who's facing 16 years in prison. And what we need from the courts in order for him to do well at the academy is for the courts to say, we aren't screwing around with you. You walk out, if you quit the Other Side Academy, you are doing your 16 years. Wow. If he knows that, it'll help him get through his hard days, and it'll help him get to a little better place. And in fact, that happened. Adam walked away about a week ago, and within half an hour, he turned around and came back because he came to his senses. And he thought 16 years versus putting up with a little bit of grief sitting in a group of 20 people telling me about myself, I'll take the 20 people.
Yeah, exactly. What's the range age? You're talking about probably all ages of people, men, women, right?
Yeah.
That you're
one of our, we had what's called call-offs last night. This is where people graduate from freshman, sophomore, junior, senior. One of our new seniors is a guy named Eric, who was literally raised by wolves. He was eating out of dumpsters, fed on porn and violence, and just an awful upbringing. And this is the first safe family he's ever had. But he became a senior last night. The kid's 20 years old, and he's now a crew boss in charge of men who are 50 to 60 years old. And it's a beautiful thing to watch this young guy who's feeling his strength and integrity and character coming, and literally becoming a mentor for people that are 3 times his age. So any age adult who's capable of working a full day is welcome to apply.
It is so encouraging to hear stories like that, and stories of real change. And we saw it, and I see it. We go in and teach some of the principles, some of the things we talked about, a lot on identity. We did at the mission, but also the local prison here, men and women. We had a small group of women inmates. You could just see the hunger, the desire for something different, especially when God is at the center. Because, we are pray our way in and pray our way out. God, just in this moment, like just, help us to make a statement or two that might draw them closer to you, or something that we can do to teach them a different way. And so I just know that the opportunity's there, but it starts with a hand raised. You said it. I want to be well. I want to be well. I don't want to live this life on the streets. One of the mission here in our community is part of the same network that Denver Rescue Mission is part of. And so we know the folks out there, and we know the considerable issues. Is there any plan or desire to sort of scale this in any way? Or what does it look like for the Other Side Academy, moving forward, I think?
Yeah, our mission is to get a bench, this access point, the place where people first arrive at the academy, a bench in every city in the world that wants one.
Rob.
And so after 8 years, there are now 5 benches. So we have 2 that are run by the Other Side Academy, 3 others that we train.
Okay.
And so we consider both of these campuses as teaching hospitals. And people come from all around the world and live on our campus for a week or so to try to learn the model so that they can take it back and replicate it on their own. The second thing we're doing is we're starting a second kind of community called the Other Side Village. So the Other Side Academy works well for people that don't have really severe mental health challenges. Everybody's got some level of challenge, but at least, they don't have severe schizophrenia or schizoaffective disorder, bipolar, and so on. And that leaves a significant population of those who are homeless out. So we have committed, and in fact, we're just now breaking ground to build a 400 home community for the chronically homeless that has the same kind of restorative, therapeutic community that the Other Side Academy does. It will be self-reliant. It will support itself. It won't be an ongoing fundraising problem. It's going to be safe, and it will be beautiful. This will be a sober community. And the response of folks in Utah are sick and tired of seeing money thrown into programs that really don't change lives.
Right.
And that literally just stick you in a hotel room until you collapse again and get kicked out. And this will be a first of its kind, and that will be a next extension for the Other Side Academy. So there's a picture of the students in Denver at the top and the campus in Salt Lake on the bottom. Just gives you a little view of the Other Side Academy.
Oh,
and this is one of the amazing things. So these are students when they arrive.
Oh.
So there you got Will and Robbie and Tiffany and Mo. Mo had been living in an elevator shaft in San Francisco for 10 years about the time that picture was taken.
Wow.
And he would rob apartments in the building during the day and then get high at night and get up and repeat the same cycle. Will on the far left was on his way to prison. And this is them today on the bottom.
Oh my gosh. God bless them. That is
God
awesome.
Bless them. God has blessed them and transformed them. And they are now the pioneer staff of the Other Side Village. So people who themselves were homeless are the initial mentors for people coming off the street. And, what better way would God want it done?
What a redemption story that is. Boy, I can't think of a better. You're right. No better way. That is so encouraging. Wow.
This is a little bit of a distraction here, but I've got to show it to you. This is Daniel.
You were all dressed up there for a minute.
Yeah, that's the justice of the peace there. I conducted this wedding.
Oh, good for you. That's great.
Story there between my wife and myself.
Yes.
Should be in prison right now.
Oh.
Husband on the far left should be in prison right now, but instead they've graduated. They're marrying each other, 2 graduates of the program. And all of her bridesmaids would be in prison too, if it weren't for the fact that they graduated from the Other Side Academy. And so there it is. I mean, this is it. And this is the team that is now saving lives and building the village. So here's the village.
Okay.
This is the master plan. So you'll see down here in the front are social enterprise space. And that's where we'll have businesses that people in the village can work at. This is a 600-seat performance hall where we'll have events and musical and festival type things to bring the community together. There's a grocery store over here on the left. And as
it looks like waterfront to me. Is that right?
Yeah, kind of does, doesn't it?
Did I see water along there? That's awesome. Look at that.
Beautiful place. And the symbol of the lighthouse there. It's a big hope for people to come to. As it rises up, you see the neighborhoods. Mm-hmm. So they're small cottage homes, about 250 to 400 square feet, but beautiful homes, wonderfully furnished. And you'll notice also that the neighborhoods are organized in rings. And the whole idea, like at the academy, is to build a community and to have a social influence system. The homes are oriented inwards. So when you walk out your front door, it's hard to isolate. You're going to see the neighbors. You're going to understand what's going on with them. You can hold them accountable and address concerns before they start to become a problem. So that's the idea. This will be, again, a 400 home community. Ultimately, we'll house about 600 people. It'll be completely self-reliant based on social enterprise income and rents that the participants will pay. And what keeps it safe is that everybody is responsible for the safety of the community. And that's what the Other Side Academy has learned to do. That's what the village will be based on. And let me see if I can get a picture of one of the homes here.
Sure. Now, this is in the Salt Lake area. Is this where this will be? Okay.
Yeah. So this is the interior furnished. This is what all the units will look like. Have a separate little bedroom with heating and air conditioning. Have a fully functioning kitchen, a little place where you can have a friend and do some visiting.
Well, if things get rough out here, I'm going to be headed to Salt Lake. I know where I'd be happy to join you there.
It'll be heaven. It's going to be absolutely
heaven. Oh my gosh, this is so good.
Yeah, so there you go. That's a little bit of a glimpse.
Oh, that's perfect. Thanks for sharing that. That was a bonus that I didn't expect to see and to learn about. So again, so encouraging the work that you're doing. Has this turned into a greater calling for you? Are you spending more time with it? It seems, perhaps. Is that true?
Yeah. I have 2 full-time lives. So crucial learning is still the passion that started my direction here.
Right.
But as I said earlier, God sets things in motion years in advance to save people when they're ready. You think of Tori in that wedding picture. The odds that our lives would have intersected were about 0.
Yeah.
She was a heroin addict and a sex worker on the streets of Salt Lake City. And I share that with her permission.
Yes.
And the likelihood of us ever having been part of a cause together was about 0 until God gets involved. But he has me write a book where I do a case study about a place called Delancey Street that inspires me to start the Other Side Academy, that eventually opens the door to her coming and sitting on the bench. And now the 2 of us helping to build this village together. And what are the odds? And,
they're only God's odds, which are pretty good. We just have no clue because we have the best laid plans of man just never quite work that way, do they? I've learned to lay all that down years ago, and because I was pretty much a control freak like most people in my growing up years. You probably know what I mean. It is just saying, no, Lord, I just surrender. I give it to you, and look what you have done. It's a beautiful story when you bring the people whose lives have been changed into it with you, isn't it? It's just a great, great story. Thank you for sharing that. You are currently in Denver, so Salt Lake. You said where the other locations where things are happening now?
There's one in Iowa, one in Pennsylvania, and another one north in Utah that was started by a different group, but we trained them, and there are dozens more that are out there that are working on replicating the model. We want a bench in every city in the world that wants one.
I think that is the best goal that you could possibly have. God, he'll open up the doors. We're going to love watching this story unfold over time. And you have been a wonderful guest to share all this with us, our viewers, our listeners. This is a podcast, but it's also on video, so they will get a chance to tune in. They'll have to switch over to see the good parts. But what would you want to, share with our listeners and viewers that they should take away from just your experience with this, just even your work, all of that? Can you leave us with some words of wisdom?
Yeah, I think that there's nothing more gratifying to me than knowing that God has asked me to do something and then going out and doing it. And for me, the key to that happening more often in my life, so that I have more of those opportunities for joy and to be involved in something that's just immensely wonderful, is if I pay attention to preparatory promptings. I look back on my life and I can see moments where God said, reach out and talk to Steve, go to lunch with so-and-so, read this book. And the problem is those little moments pass so quickly. And if I ignore them, then they're gone. And then I'm not prepared for that moment. I could have had this wonderful experience to be part of his work. And so everything good in my life happened because I paid attention to preparatory promptings. And I would just invite all of us to honor those when they happen. Usually they come inexplicably. We have no idea what they mean. Why would I read this book? Who cares? Mm-hmm. But if I remember what that feeling feels like, write it down and diligently follow up, joy happens.
We wouldn't be connected today, you and I, if it weren't for preparatory prompting. I was connected on LinkedIn. I popped up that you had an anniversary at Other Side Academy. And I said, Other Side Academy? What do I not know here? And I just followed the breadcrumbs. So see, that's how it works. And here we are talking about that. If anyone is interested in helping in any way or connecting with you, the Other Side Academy, and all the work that's going on there, how would they do that?
Go to theothersideacademy.com or theothersidevillage.com. And there's enormous information there about what we're doing and how, and ways of reaching out to contact as well. And of course, my other life is Crucial Learning, and cruciallearning.com has the fundamental resources we've used to help build these great organizations.
That is amazing. Joseph, thank you so much. Blessings to you for joining me today. This has been an honor to be a part of what you're doing, and it just encourages all of us. Thank you.
Me too. Thank you, Steve. God bless you.
Bless you too.
This was another episode of the Embracing Brokenness podcast. For more information on Embracing Brokenness Ministries, or to subscribe to our blog, podcast, YouTube channel, or engage with us on social media, please visit our website at embracingbrokenness.org. Thanks for joining us.